Welcome, everyone. This is the Finance Committee. This is Thursday, February 19th, 2026. It's 6:31, and I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the
United
States of America,
and
and
to
to
the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty
for all
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. On March 28, 2025, Governor Healey signed into law a bill which extends the temporary provisions pertaining to open meeting law to June 30th, 2027. Specifically, this further extension allows for public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely without a public quorum of the public body physically present at a meeting location, and to provide adequate alternative access to remote meetings. This language does not make any substantive changes to the open meeting law other than extending the expiration of the temporary provisions regarding remote meetings from March 31st, 2025 to June 30th, 2027. Well, hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for being here on a Thursday. It feels out of sorts here. I'm going to start off with who's here tonight. So we need to do just a notice of who's at the meeting. So we have Duncan Law as members. We've got Cindy Brown, Al Lees, Zachary Brew, Morton, Christopher Thrasher. And I think I got and myself, Karen Rouse. So that is who is here presently. So absent at the moment is Nancy Stanton Cross and Gary Guerrero. But we do have a quorum, so we're ready to go. So we're the first item we had on the agenda was actually a request for transfer, but since we do have Chris Vitale, our town administrator here, I don't want to take his time to talk through that. So we can, if everyone's okay, we can just skip to the second item on the agenda, which is to talk about the fiscal 27 budget.
Okay.
Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming again. Always
No
appreciate
problem at
it.
all. Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. So we're closing in on some coming to some conclusions, or at least of a first round of a budget, right? So just to give everyone an update, I think the select board did take us up on the opportunity to use a little more time so they could extend their time to really think through the budget. So is that scheduled for next Monday? Is that right, Chris? So next Monday.
That is correct.
The
Yes.
board is scheduled to approve. And so just to let everyone know, so Chris, the chair of the select board, and myself had got together a little bit about a week ago to review the budget and review what are our options, what are some things we can do. Chris had some great ideas, and I think he's started to incorporate those in. He did present his options to the select board at the last meeting, and the select board seemed to be inclined to be in favor of those. And Chris forwarded us that presentation as well, so that's in the drive if everyone's had a chance to look at the latest version. And just to clarify, I think, Chris, what you sent us was the same presentation that you had discussed at the select board, not incorporating yet the changes that you are going to adopt in the numbers, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So, the budget that was provided to the board was a balanced budget, not utilizing one-time funds on any department lines. The figures that were discussed took into consideration the revenue changes, from the state, and those updates in state aid, as well as incorporated, what the school department had approved as their budget. So, the discussion with the board at their last meeting was, how do we address the variance that was there? Obviously, similar to prior years, utilizing the one-time funds, the free cash is part of that. Also, as Karen mentioned, I also just looked at other options, other things within the school budget, where, we may be able to assist, or we may be able to, as an example, move it out of the budget and maybe put it aside as a separate article to help reduce that gap. So, the proposals on those different options that I provided to the board at their last meeting, they have tentatively, agreed to those. I think they just wanted to see it all put together and take a final vote at this upcoming meeting before formally submitting it to the finance committee. But the changes in that presentation, more or less is going to be the difference between what was presented at the last board meeting and what you'll see here at the upcoming meeting on Monday.
Right. And just to, I just wanted to highlight too, so when the school came in and did a presentation of their budget, and I think the question was asked on where the school number stood in relation to the town budget, and the school was asking again for the 480,000 of free cash, which was the same number as last year. I think there was a little discrepancy in that number. So the number that the school, I think at that time, had received from the prior town administrator was a higher number than what actually was working in the budget at that time. So there was a discrepancy of about 250,000 that wasn't identified in the school's presentation at that time. So as Chris was saying, when Chris did the budget update, there was assuming the same 480,000 would be neutral, there was still a $250,000 gap. So that was one of the reasons that we needed to, discuss what, how do we, what are some options to address it? And Chris did a terrific job. So one of the items that we've talked about here for a long time is really local receipts and budgeting, and we've been reasonably conservative, budgeting at 80% of what the anticipated revenues are. And so there's always some risk when you increase I think somebody's got some noise going on. I'm not sure who.
Duncan, could you mute your microphone,
Yeah.
please? It's
Sorry.
your background. That's all right. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. So it's certainly always an option to increase the revenue, but then what happens is if you think what 100% of the revenue is and you budget at a higher amount and then the revenue isn't what it is, you've really squeezed your numbers, and you might be able to get by in the current year, but it's really going to hurt you in the future years.
Right.
So there's a balance between that. And I think Chris's numbers made an estimate to go up to 85% of the local receipts. So really, getting a little more aggressive. So that will mean, in theory, less free cash coming through, and we're utilizing those dollars to actually fund the budget. So, that puts a little more risk into next year's budget if things, shrink down a little bit. So you have more exposure. But I think that was one of the changes, Chris, that you put through. And then so now there's additional revenue, and I think there's a little additional revenue that came through from the state aid had produced some numbers. So there's a little more revenue that came through there, not a lot more. And so rolling that all through the budget really helped, along with talking with the school about, and that's a separate conversation about what to do with the school number, but that helped flow some more dollars through not only to the school, but to the town side as well. And so one of the discussions was, well, what to do with the additional funds for the town. And so the in this budget, I believe, is going to be adding a police officer as a proposal to help utilize the extra funds that came on the town side as one of the positions that had been discussed that were short. So So again, just not making any comment what those of whether or not I agree or not. I'm just trying to present what's being proposed, so then we can all also talk about, how do we feel about that, and do we think that makes sense, or do we have any additional comments on that? I think those were the main highlights, right, Chris?
Yes. So I would say, just with regards to what the board will be considering on Monday, there is still going to be a variance, of 135,000. The way, or as it's currently proposed within the school budget, I know that they were looking to fund some new positions there. Social studies teacher, career pathways coordinator, and I think some funding that was partially going to be supplemented by opioid funding. So part from the school, and then part of the, I think the personnel salary would have been from the opioid line. I have not heard from that committee in terms of allocating the funds, and I'm not aware of any other warrant article that's going to be put forward on that. So I don't know if that would materialize for this fiscal year. But I think to offset the new service, one of the things that I will note as part of the school budget is, they are offsetting the new salaries with some restructuring that was done. So, there is funding there for, I believe, one of those positions, one of really the two that are being requested. So that I would say is the only variance of what we, just looking at the numbers, we weren't able to put forward as a recommendation at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Hugh, go ahead. You've got your hand up, and then Christopher.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of pushing things around on the Titanic, but I'd rather not expand the amount of estimated revenues used in the budget, even though that requires more use of free cash. Because if you do that, you're basically stealing from free cash, but it isn't so obvious that you're doing it. And so when you put to the free cash item the next year, it'll be less than you may have been anticipating. It's going to come out the same way. Money's money, but I'd rather keep the percentage that is used for the estimate, or not to a tenth of a point, but basically the same percentage, and the deal with free cash and the next year and things that need to be covered at that time.
Thank you, Hugh. That is a great point. And so, as once it's in the budget as revenue, then the spending will rise to that level and then becomes a permanent piece of the budget.
Right.
Where it's harder when that happens, if the revenue in future periods does shrink, then you are looking at true cuts, right? So, so there's a balance between that, but thank you, Hugh. Go ahead, Christopher.
Chair, first question that I had was regarding the actual numbers that we're working with right now. So the presentation that's in the folder that was given to the select board on the 9th, are those the numbers that we're talking about with the adjustments that you're referring to at this time?
The numbers are before the adjustments. So the numbers that are in that Chris gave us were what he presented to the select board, and then in memo discussion discussed, here's some options, but so we don't have an after budget that reflects those.
Okay, so at this time we don't have the actual numbers that are going to be presented to the select board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, that's worth noting first off. My second question,
which is a little harder to have this conversation because we have to be without seeing it in front of us. So that was my exact question. I mean, is it if it's not possible to have those numbers tonight, then for one thing, I understand they need to discuss it, but it's hard to do it without the numbers right in front of us. The other question that I had was regarding what the
free cash allocation list as it stood right now. And again, if the numbers are different, this math is not going to hold up. But by my math, unless I'm doing something terribly wrong, which is always possible because, as I like to joke, I went to law school, so I didn't have to do math. I'm looking at about 463,000 and change of free cash that's not allocated currently. Is that still an accurate figure based on the adjustments that have been made?
No. So I know that the board is still, going to be discussing that on Monday with regards to the allocation. However, we are, I would say, just under 30,000 in terms of remaining free cash allocation after you go through the warrant articles, the capital allocations to that we've done historically to the stabilization fund. But ultimately the board will have to take that vote on Monday.
So forgive me for cutting you off. So I just want to say, are there additional allocations that were not in your presentation on the 9th, or are we talking the adjustments that have been made to all the allocations that were presented then?
So hold on, I apologize. Give me one moment here.
And while you find that, Chris, let me, one other item that I think is part of free cash was the discussion on the capital improvement committee, where the highway department had a vehicle that the CIPC felt that if there was free cash, they would recommend. So I think that's also is being factored into your numbers too.
That's correct. So the presentation provided the board, and they had discussed it at the meeting, was two things. Number one is on the list provided, they did want to add an article there for the capital stabilization fund, which is something the town has, historically done. And as Karen mentioned, the dump truck was the other. Now, just, again, just based off of the discussion at the last board meeting, the allocation to those articles, I think they still have to take a vote on that. But obviously part of that's just going to be based on the policy that's in place for a couple of those funds.
Is it possible for you? So I'm just trying to figure out, understanding that these are not the exact numbers that are going to be voted on Monday. I'm trying to figure out how we went from 463,000 to 30,000. Even because the dump truck is included in here in the previous numbers you had already given. So are we talking just capital stabilization fund funding, or how? I'm just trying to figure out how we made that jump.
Yeah. So, capital stabilization is typically at 5%. So that'd be 182,000. On the top of my head, I believe the dump truck is 157,000. Historically, the board has increased the funding to the special education stabilization fund. So the proposal at 2.5. I think there was still some question of whether or not that wanted to go up to 5%. So that, like I said, that final allocation, depending on, I would say, those few different stabilization articles there, you're going to be either have to take something off of them just to, not exceed what the available free cash allocation is, or depending on, again, how that falls, it's going to be very close to, like I would say, probably that 30,000
so that
number. That's going to be discussed at the meeting on Monday.
Okay, just forgive me for pressing. So the dump truck is included in the figures that you presented on the 9th. So what I'm just trying to figure out, are we talking 430,000 for stabilization funds alone, or were there any other adjustments that were being made at this time?
So I am not aware of any additional adjustments outside of the conversations on the stabilization fund and exactly how much they want to allocate to those. And obviously, when it comes to the final amounts, like I said, part of that is going to be the school. So the 352 that I think was in the presentation, was an approximate. So that might adjust by a few thousand as well. So, again, unfortunately, I don't have the breakdown of each of them, but that's the discussion that took place at the meeting. And
Chris, not
Yeah.
to interject, but I think in your presentation to the select board at that time, you didn't have the capital stabilization listed, right? So then that did get added to it afterwards, right? I think that's a piece of
That's
your
correct.
number, right?
correct.
Yeah, so it, again, forgive the math here, but I do have Excel to aid me here a little bit. So even if we're talking about 500 or 5% for the special education fund, 5% for the capital stabilization, that still leaves 189,000. So I'm just trying to figure out where the jump is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as a follow-up, I'm happy to provide the table with the breakdown along with, what's discussed by the board. I think, obviously I want to make sure that the finance committee has a clear picture of what's available there, in terms of, free cash availability, as you continue your discussions.
Well, were all of the articles funded at that point too in the original discussion? So some of those funds also were attributed perhaps to some of the article funding. So there's the first article, or it's like the second or third article now for the original stabilization fund. And that was bumped up to $182,000. I don't recall us ever having that large of a sum available to be put in there. So that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. So I think there are some things in there that are funded higher than we perhaps are used to, and that perhaps some of the warrant articles were not funded. And so once you start ticking off the boxes of funding various warrant articles, that came down. There was $100,000 that got moved, or $80,000 that got moved from the school budget to the warrant articles, and that came out of free cash. So that was kind of a trade-off there as well. So that was the article for the computers. So I think if you go through some of the article listings, you'll pick up nickels and dimes that quickly start to add up to some of those differences. I'm estimating here that that's where some of those dollars start to come from. I agree with Christopher that I think it's probably premature for us to discuss this in a lot of detail tonight until the select board has kind of given us their budget approved. And then we will have something to work with and actual numbers to work with. We could go through warrant articles. But I guess what my question was to Chris was, you started out your conversation by saying you still had a gap of $135,000, right?
So yes. So I think there was what the school proposal was, right? And there was assumptions in there based off of, anticipated revenue.
Okay, so you're
more
talking
or
about
less
the
a
school
request.
budget. You're talking about
That's
the school.
correct.
Oh, okay. I thought
Correct. So yeah.
that our town
So-
budget still had a gap of 135. Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
Okay.
So
Now
the
I
proposal will
follow
go to
you.
the board. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Nancy?
Hi, thank you. Chris, I just want to, when you changed these numbers, you said that it was based upon new information that you've received. What was that information that had changed that caused you to go back in and change these numbers with expected monies from the state budget?
So are you talking about from December to now?
Yeah.
So, back in December, Jim had put together a more or less a table of possible sources of revenue. And, I think just based off the information at the time, a range of what we may be able to get for additional revenue through kind of what we talked about this evening, increasing local receipt estimations. I think he gave a range for state aid. And, with the school budget, it was based on the assumption that we get more revenues than we actually did, right? at that point in time from state, I think from like state aid, and unfortunately I don't have it in front of me, but I think his estimation was as high as we might be able to get, like 2.8% state aid. We got 2.3%, which, when you go down the line, you look at those different options, it adds up pretty quick. So I think in the budget that was proposed through the school, and again, I apologize, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was, I think, 200,000+ in anticipated new revenue, and the state aid came in at 66,000. So
That's what I'm trying, that's my question. So you
Yeah.
said based on the updated revenue projections, is that a
Correct.
preliminary cherry sheet that you received? Because the governor's budget just went in 2 weeks ago. So was there there was the preliminary budget that came in?
So there's the cherry sheet estimates, and then there's the governor's budget. This budget is based off of the updated estimates from once the governor's budget was released.
So you've based, your change of this budget was based on the governor's budget that came out 2 weeks ago, right?
Correct.
Okay. And my understanding, we know that that's got to go to committee and work its way through, and we don't know what it is.
That's right.
And based on that, so what I see, and tell me if I'm wrong, the net new revenue that Jim projected, who's always been conservative, was reduced by you. You increased the use of that to 85% over Jim's estimated 80%, but you decreased the number of the pot. So those figures, so if Jim's numbers were used and we used 85%, I know that the schools presented their budget. It was directed at this board of Mr. Gendro. How would you suggest we fill these gaps? And he said, well, you can increase what we take in as a percentage to, he suggested 85%.
Excuse me.
And that's in fact what we heard before the select board recently, that you took that into consideration and did raise it. But on the same hand, you lowered what Jim said. So you shrunk the pot, but up the percentage.
So
Am I right?
I guess I think there's kind of two different discussions here. So I think one is, local receipts, in terms of how we track that from a revenue standpoint, that 85% doesn't touch state aid. So I think state aid in terms of a funding source year over year, it's separate. So on one category, we look at local receipts that we set the fees, and that is largely based on economic conditions year over year. State aid is obviously variable, also based on economic conditions, but also more or less it's separate. So the two aren't related. The 85% and the state aid aren't related.
No,
Now,
well,
when Jim put together his figures, he gave a range for what he thought the state aid increase could be. And I guess based on his best educated guess at the time, it was not at the high end. It wasn't at the low end, but it wasn't at the high end. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Your best educated guess is based on the governor's budget to have changed these numbers. I got that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess my next question would be, suppose as it goes, these meetings go through as they do, committee, whatnot, and we get more information. Like we said, we don't have enough information tonight. Suppose we get more information and your estimates, which are lower than Jim's, are different, and they're maybe more looking like Jim's numbers. Are we going to adjust the numbers at that time? Is that something? Karen's nodding, but
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't want to
I'm
answer
sorry,
for
Karen.
Chris since he's.
well, I
new.
just, do we
Yeah.
adjust the numbers?
Yes, absolutely. So what'll happen is the select board will have to make a budget based on the most recent information that they have, which would be the governor's budget. So typically the select board budget wouldn't project state aid different than the most recent information. So we all keep our fingers crossed that as we go down the line, there'll be more revenue. So it'll come over to us in a way that the select board needs to balance the budget, but the finance committee is going to hold. We have another month before we really have to approve the budget. So we're going to hold in hope that another round of cherry sheet will come through. And then we'll, we always go back and work with the town administrator and figure out, well, what makes sense. And if there is funds, how do we flow that through? And then we would certainly try to work together on that as well. So yes.
No,
so
I'm learning as I
definitely
go
an
on. So,
opportunity.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to say, obviously, if it goes
Yeah.
up, I'm learning as I go,
Yeah,
as rough
no,
as it may seem.
absolutely.
I have a whole new appreciation for the finance committee. I will
Yeah.
say that.
There'll be a point in time, Nancy, that we'll have to approve the budget as the warrant needs to get done. So we can't wait forever.
Right.
But we try to wait as long as we can to get the most information that comes through. Usually if the next round of cherry sheet comes through, that's probably going to be it. There won't be another round. So the way the state works so slowly. So,
Okay. The only other follow-up question, I got one more, Chris, and this is, your new growth that you have is significantly lower than the growth in the last 6 years. That number is much lower than the previous year. And then if you go back in the 6 years, it's lower across the board. We have numbers of 2022, 691, 874, 2023, 846. I'm looking under property taxes, new growth number 3, in case anybody doesn't know where I am, because I have to flip through all this stuff. And so I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, 679 the next year, then 736, then 627. You've gotten that, you've put that down to 400. So you're $227,473 lower on this new growth line item. What is the rationale for that?
So, this is something that has been a practice. So this is not, I would say, any different than what we've done prior years when it comes to estimating new growth. Now, as you can kind of see the most recent years, new growth is variable based on economic conditions. And so, similar to what we do with local receipts, we put in there I would say a conservative estimate to ensure that we don't go in the red in terms of what we're anticipating, which again, there is an economic slowdown, and so that is something where, if you do look at, new growth over the last several years, it's variable, right? I mean, the actual is FY22 to FY24. And so with that,
no variable dumped down as low as you have it. The percentage is much greater from from the last year to this year. And I didn't know if there was a driving force for you, because even if you say it's the practice, the percentage that you dropped the new growth, I didn't know if there was something from left field that came in that caused you say, oh, this is the reason I did that. The practice is the practice, but as demonstrated across the last 6 years, you're even lower than what the town has been doing. And I'm not saying that it's not, you got to do whatever you got to do, but I'm saying if that number does not come as low as projected, then that would make up for the shortfalls that we have on some of the budget.
Yeah. So, and just, I guess, clarification on, I believe, the table that you're referring to. So if you're looking at that, you're looking at actuals, but at the time that the budgets were developed, in all the fiscal years, at least in recent memory, the town, similar to local receipts, has taken a conservative approach there because, again, if we were to budget, I'm just going to use an example, to 650,000. Well, if I were to equate it to local receipts, we'd be at 98%. And if there is an economic downturn or stagnation, that puts us in a very difficult position to try and make that up elsewhere. So, again, that's kind of why I say that this has been something that the town has done I highly recommend that, as part of any budget, I would put forward that number stay the way it is.
So the new growth numbers for 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26 are actual. Those were the numbers that actually occurred. Is that what you're saying?
26 is budgeted because we do
Okay,
not have
so-
the actuals for this fiscal year
Okay,
yet.
so that's not. So if we looked at, to analyze this, then I would need to see what was the new growth that was projected and versus the actual that was received to do the full analysis. Would that be the way to look at that?
Yeah, I guess if you wanted to see what we estimated versus how well the market did year over year, yeah.
Well, when you're talking about when we're cutting things or we're not supplying money to the budget and we're using estimates, my only concern is that we have a basis for that. We can all say there could be stagnation, there could be I get all that. And I think that that's been people that came before me and before you had some type of methodology to determine that. So when you come down from the previous year in the manner that you did, and then you're saying those are actuals, I'd be interested to see what was projected. Like how risky has the town been? How conservative has it been? That was my only question. So that's why I was looking at it that way. Okay, thank you.
And just to, Chris, Nancy, just to, in previous budgets, Jim has always left that number at 400,000. So as Chris was saying, that's been the practice a little bit. So just to reiterate, that's been always been the methodology.
So, okay, so the 400 is kind of across the board,
Yeah.
Karen, as what the
Yep.
projected has been. And
Yep.
then we're looking, so then we get the actual. So if
Yep.
if I do this right, if I looked at 2023 and it was $846,000, we projected 4, which then resulted in 446 some odd $1,000 of additional revenue, correct?
That would be, yeah.
And if
Yep.
that happened, is that the money that goes into free cash because we haven't used it in our budget? Is that the way that works?
That would be part of surplus revenues. Yes, that would
Okay.
then go into free cash.
Then that's okay. Now I have a
Yep.
very clear understanding. So
Yep.
considering if we do 4 across the board and what we've earned percentage wise, I would just respectfully suggest if we're looking for money, that could be another area that we might maybe increase the 400 a little bit. And we could have potentially the money that's necessary so we don't have to have that we can have a town meeting without any competing motions is what I was suggesting to think about, but I'm done.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the education.
Thank you. No, absolutely. That's why I want to keep making sure to answer the questions in many ways to make sure that you and everybody else gets the information. So, Al, go ahead. You've been patient and I know Christopher's already.
No, that's
I wanna
fine.
let
That's
you go
fine.
For a bit.
I have a comment and Nancy stole my thunder, which was good. My comment was that a couple of meetings ago, we were, and I've been in touch with Dick Brewer about getting the list of the 1, 3, and 5 year list. I haven't heard back from him. He got back to me via email, so I'll reach out to him again and get it to the finance committee as soon as I can. My other question, which Nancy brought up, is really the question about. See, I have very little faith in the pardon me, the state funding anything locally other than their crazy little jumps. So I was curious what the new growth number was in the town, which Chris, you said it, the number that was plugged in, because that's really what we can rely on. I mean, other than some incremental increase at the state level, it's really the new growth. And the new growth, I believe, just from driving around town, this is anecdotal, is slowing down. Doesn't mean it's dead by any stretch, but it is slowing down over the last 4, 5, 6 years. I just don't see the you know, and there was an earlier question, and then I'll end it there. What has changed over the last 5 or 6 years? Well, one of the things is COVID. You know, people aren't coming in the way they used to. People aren't tricking out their homes, buying homes and whatnot, but that's here and there. We have to deal with the revenue sources that we, have in front of us. So anyway, the main point was I'll be getting back to Dick Brewer again tomorrow to get that information.
Great, thank you, Al. Christopher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a brief follow-up question regarding strictly talking about percentages with regard to local receipts. So I know Jim, as late as maybe not last year, but the year before, I think it was down to about 74%. My question is, so Chris, on the local receipts, what percentage are you operating on right now for the current version of the budget?
I'm sorry. So the one that's going to be proposed for Monday, or what?
Yes,
or
what is going to be proposed? You said 85%.
Yes.
And that's local receipts, not including state aid. That's my question is specifically to
Right.
local receipts.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And just out of curiosity, when budget memos were sent to departments, either from Jim or from yourself earlier this year, at what percentage were you starting from, I guess, when you were building? My question is, what has the change been from where we started with the budget process this year to now as far as the local receipts go?
So, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at Jim's memos to department heads as to what he estimated. I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're asking.
So my question is, has as part of your adjustments and the ideas that you've put forth, that's going to be discussed on Monday, I'm of the understanding that you have increased the percentage of local receipts from your previous budget. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Of local receipts?
Yes.
I'm
So now the budget is at 85% of local receipts is being utilized
Correct.
for this budget. So
Correct.
what was my question is, what is that increased from when you began the process?
So the variance for local receipts is 308,000. So that I guess as part of this upcoming proposal, give or take 160 something, is going to be applied to the school, based off the presentation, based off the 54-46 revenue split, with the remaining going to, the town, as Karen mentioned, to, look at, potentially an officer, again, based on board discussion here on Monday.
Okay, so if the variance is 308,000, my question is percentage wise, does that mean you had started at 80 or below? I'm just trying to see.
I think it was about 82.
About 82. Okay.
And
All right.
just
That was
to,
it for now. Thank you very much.
Chris,
Yeah, no problem.
Christopher, just to in the fiscal 26 budget, Jim increased local receipts to 80%. So the 74 had been in fiscal 25 and older. So in fiscal 26, they already accounted for a bump.
As I
already.
recall, it was at say 74 in fiscal 25 and then 20, and then
Yeah.
originally I think he had it somewhere around 77, 78, and then it ended up at 80. So that's
Yeah.
okay. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Great, thank you. So just to wrap up, my only comment, Chris, and thank you for everything that you're doing. I know you haven't presented the budget to the select board, so we appreciate just kind of poking some holes and kind of having a discussion. But so my only concern about the budget is, as always, when we increase our revenues to be more aggressive, that balances the budget this year and makes it seem great, and helps this year, but it puts a much tighter burden in future years, right? So I can support going to an 85% of local receipts. But with that, I would have an expectation that free cash that's used in the budget would be lower than the 480,000 that was used to support the budget. I wouldn't be in support of increasing revenues more aggressively in maintaining the same level of free cash. So if you're going to take the opportunity to increase revenues, that's the opportunity to start to bring down the need for free cash. So as long as the revenues go up and we're using less free cash, then I think that's a good balance. If we increase and get more aggressive on revenues and don't decrease free cash, we're adding to a budget problem. We're increasing our issues. That's my comment. Go ahead, Nancy.
So have revenues gone up?
Well, so by changing local receipts an estimate to become 85% of revenues instead of 80, that is going to increase revenues in the budget.
No, I understand that, but like, I don't know if that, but what happened is you talked about it being aggressive to move that number. But on the same note, he lowered the number of the aid and revenue estimates. So so you lowered so you upped the pot, but you lowered the pot and upped the number. So they kind of worked in concert with each other. So it did give a little bit of a bump, but so I don't think it was aggressive. You can call it aggressive if he would have stayed at the numbers that Jim started with and said it's 85. But when you lower the numbers from what Jim said, and then you up the percentage, it's kind of counterproductive on both sides, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a difference. So there's two separate pots of money. So the state aid is budgeted at 100% of what the state is going to give us. So the fact that that number is lower is because the state's giving us lower. That's very independent of looking at local receipts and budgeting them. So if all overall revenue's down, that's a reality from the state. We can't offset that in that way. So it's two completely separate conversations. So state aid is low or not as high as Jim anticipated. It's not lower. It's not as high as Jim initially had anticipated. And he was just making an assumption without much information because it was very early in the process. So revenues aren't being lowered. They're being lowered from an estimate that was made very early.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to comment on, the overall budget philosophy. As part of the proposal, like I said, what's going to be before the board Monday, when it comes to, free cash supplementing the school budget, it's significantly less than what it's been over the last couple of years. I think, my understanding of the conversation to date is that, the goal is to have an off ramp from utilizing the free cash that is not impacting the existing operation of the school. And so, how do you do that in a way where, it's not cuts, right, to programs, to, existing class, teachers, class sizes, et cetera. So, I think that is the goal here. I think, obviously, as we get, a better understanding, better finances, we get into a better financial state, I think the idea is, just like we do in other areas of the budget, we want to be able to support, the schools as much as possible. And hopefully, I know it's been a short time with my involvement, but, a place where, long term, the full amount of the new revenue coming in, it isn't being hit by last year's free cash, right? So hopefully we can get to a place where we catch up, and that the school can fully realize the new growth we get full benefit of the revenue that the town receives, and you really start to plan out for, I think long-term strategic goals that the school wants to see. I think, that's not something that unfortunately is going to get accomplished during this, condensed process, but, that's one of my priorities as we go into the summer months, to hopefully facilitate that conversation. So that again, there isn't much discussion when it comes to time of town meeting or leading up to town meeting. And then, the other thing I would say too is that with regards to, updating and being a little more aggressive, I would say, with the estimation of local receipts, I would still categorize, our allocation as conservative. So it is higher, but if there was an economic downturn, there is still a buffer there that I feel more than comfortable with, to ensure that we're not in the red on that line. So with that being said, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Cindy?
Yeah.
I'm lost
yeah.
my order, but
So,
sorry.
this is always such a very difficult task, because if you look back at some of the dates, I believe that Jim sent his memo out, his budget memo out to department heads in October. Okay, so October is 3 months into the current fiscal year. The budget that the state set, the governor just submitted the budget 2 weeks ago, 1st of February. So there's such a lag time in between, and anything can happen in between. And so it's always very difficult for any of us to try to get a good handle on what's the right figure. Are we having a good year, a bad year? And it's impossible to know at that time. Technology has certainly helped a lot. We can get information now instantaneously. And I think if you look back on free cash figures from 5, 8, 10 years ago, you'll see that the town administrator previous to Jim, Tim King, he was very aggressive with local aid money. And it was in the 92%, if not 95% range. And our free cash numbers were very low then. And the state was having its share of issues. And the state this year is also continuing to perhaps be a little bit skinny. I mean, the governor has certainly had a very large plate of things to spend some money on. People are exiting the state, and things are not as rosy as they were 3 years ago. And there's been distributions of excess funds in other areas. So I think that for us to be in a somewhat conservative year, if you will, from a state aid standpoint, as well as the 85% is low compared to what we've had in the past, but it's a good place to be. I mean, I think it's a good place to be that we have a little bit better handle on where the state is coming from. And, we're acknowledging the need for a little bit more realistic, perhaps, receipt of local receipts, of local tax receipts. People aren't buying cars as much as they were. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that local receipt package, and it'll be interesting to see how that does fall out. But I think 85% is a safe number. But it's a big guessing game. We used to have a lot of special town meetings in the past, mainly to deal with a lot of these things. We have no idea what contract negotiations are going to fall out to be. And at some point, we're going to have to pay for some of those in the next fiscal year. Chris is in the middle of negotiating with at least one of the unions currently, right? Is that right, Chris? You're in contract negotiations, Chris, with one union group?
I apologize. Which Chris?
Oh, you. The other one is Christopher. You're Chris.
Yes.
Sorry.
pending.
Yeah, so you're negotiating contracts now for next year. So we don't even know what the outcome of that will be. So there's a lot of factors that are going to come into play, and there's going to be tens of thousands that are going to move from one side to the next side. This is far from over.
Right.
Thanks, Cindy. Who's next? Al, were you next? Or
Well,
Nancy? Sorry, I don't know who was.
I don't know, but I'll make it
Okay,
brief.
thank you.
In my recollection of CIPC, some of the things that we need to also think about is long-term expenses. We need more cemetery space. I mean, that's a given. I mean, it's actually, I believe, a state law that we have to provide that. That's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. In addition to that, we have equipment needs and on and on. So this whole discussion about free cash, which everybody knows, and I won't rant about it, is not really free cash, really needs to be looked at in the context of 1, 3, and 5 year and tuck it aside. All right, so that's number one of my rant. Number two, not rant, but just saying it. Number two, which I've lost the chain of thought, is simply that we have contractual agreements going to personnel, and I go back to the last meeting or the meeting before. Why is it that we don't anticipate personnel in terms of replacement cost when it comes to this? I mean, Jim was making X amount of money, Chris is making Y amount of money, the next one, whoever it might be, and we don't pay the people that we have currently, whether it's in the school or on the town side, what the current rate is. We give them 2.5%. But yet when we need somebody new, for God's sakes, we pay them 3, 4, 5, 6% more. So I think what we need to do when we're looking at this entire budget and free cash, we need to look at the future and not the current situation. I just don't believe that it is correct for the people that are currently there. I don't believe it is good for the people, 5 years down the road when I'm dead. I mean, it's just not right. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Al. Nancy, go ahead.
So I just looked at my notes on the school budget presentation, and then I went to Chris's overview summary sheet that he put in with the budget. And it said, there's a line item here about how we're going to proceed with the deferred or reduced new school services for $135,000. And so I'm going to ask Christopher, because my notes indicate that this defer or reduce new school services makes it sound like they're adding to the staff, but my understanding is that they were putting in, my notes say, a history teacher, because the class sizes were too big to handle that. So that was one. And then it was the thing that I think several of the board members agreed for the vocational career path as possibly a way for the school to keep more kids in district, as that being a good plan. So I have that line item was for those two things. And I guess I'm a little confused, and maybe Chris, you can confirm it. Are my notes right that that's what that, Christopher, is that correct?
So I can certainly shed a little bit of light. This was actually a concern. I heard earlier that I was a little concerned on the framing of quote unquote additional services or additional positions. In fact, with the restructuring and elimination of certain administrative, or I shouldn't say so much elimination as reshuffling and managing turnover, managing retirements. The quote unquote new positions were largely funded by savings within are within the school department's internal budget based on reshuffling of staff. The only true, I guess, brand new position would have been, or brand new in terms of the totality of the funding, would actually be a student support position that is intended to serve the explicit purpose of what the opioid settlement funding should be going towards. So that's doesn't mean that we were not expecting the opioid settlement funds to fund that budget or fund that position in its entirety, but that certainly was part of the equation. Additionally, when it comes to the career pathways coordinator, the reasoning behind that position is exactly what Ms. Stanton-Cross was mentioning. There is that it's intended to increase the offerings, which in turn increases the state aid, which in turn also allows the opportunity to gain more access to grants and have someone full-time who's working on getting more funding for programming that will keep students in district without going to the general budget. So that was the overall plan of action as regards that particular position. Nancy,
Well,
does that answer your question?
It does, because the way it was presented in that letter, it kind of acts like, oh, we're throwing in new positions. And I wanted, because my notes didn't indicate that, and I wanted to be clear because we've talked about, or for my first time here, about the need, like the firefighters come in and they talk about calls coming in and that they have an increase in calls. The ambulance calls, we have an elderly population, it's growing. Obviously, that goes hand in hand to an increase of calls. So when they need to put new paramedic firefighters on, you understand that, right? The calls are increasing, the needs of the town and the aging population is requiring those calls. Totally understand that. And I just, for transparency on the school side, when we have more students coming in, the class sizes have to stay a certain level by contract. And so sometimes you have to bring more people in to deal with increased student population on the same hand as you do for your other services on the town side. When you have a need, everything increases. So it's not, sometimes people look at that and feel like, oh, the school is, because I heard it when I was on the school, oh, you're throwing more positions and you're adding positions. And a lot of it is just filling the needs of what the population requires. And a lot of that is under the collective bargaining agreement, that we can only have classroom sizes of so many students on that side, from my experience over there. So you kind of get stuck with that. So I was just looking at that line and I get the side on police and fire and, the building department, everything that we need, and the health department, they needed a part-time clerk because they've got to go out and do more inspections. Now Al talks to me about growth being lower, and that's what he sees around time for 4 or 5. He told the board that tonight, but the health department is talking about an increase on their inspections. So I don't know how to gauge that. I really don't understand it enough to even talk about it, so I'm not. But I just on those line items, my thing from the school department perspective is a lot of that is they're kind of hands are tied when they have an increase in student population. So I just wanted to be clear on what those, because I wrote those down specifically, because that's something that everybody always looks at. So I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
I'm going to butt in just quickly. Nancy, do you have specific numbers as to a growth in student population?
I would not, because I'm not on the school committee. I know that my notes reflect
Christopher,
how.
do you? I mean, are we really growing the population? And if so, by how much and over how many, over how many grades?
Well, I
I'm
don't
curious.
think he's prepared to answer that question on the spot, Al. I wouldn't have ever been when I was on the committee. He can answer for himself, but I think we should give him a little time.
Yeah, but
to
that's
get that
fine, but
information.
you made the statement, and I just want supporting information. That's all I'm asking.
No, I made the statement not because I serve on the school committee, Al. I made the
I
statement because I
understand
have
that.
notes that say they said their student population increased. And that was the reason for that position, the history teacher. So I'm only saying that because that's what was said in their presentation. So as for exact numbers, I'm sure the system could provide, and I know it's in the school budget themselves. I recall when I was there, they always showed a chart of increase on student population is already in their presentation. If I'm not mistaken, it always is. So that's all I was using my notes from their meeting this year.
So, Ms. Lisa, I can certainly talk generally without having the direct numbers in front of me. I can tell you part of the issue, so the need for the history teacher has arisen because the student population within certain grade levels is increasing. And what that, some of that goes back to students coming back even after, the whole, with the new school, and you had situations where, okay, maybe the older children in the family were had to go out of district, and therefore the younger siblings did as well, just for the ease of the parents. And as those, even though the older students have now aged out, those younger ones are coming back. That is certainly a situation. I think so I do have a direct number from 2020. I think we were at 1355, so 1,355 enrollment. Now our enrollment is 1,511. But the other thing that is really crucial to consider is the ability to keep students in district. So when we talk about this career innovation pathways program and programs like that, it entices students not to go to out of district, whether it's vocational schools or other out of district placements. And the thing is, those out of district placements can have a huge impact on even an outsized impact on the school budget, as opposed to if those students, if we were providing the services in district. So that's just generally speaking. Yes, there is a trend of increased enrollment, but again, one of the core issues is trying to avoid the out of district placements as much as possible, because those really do hurt.
So what we're looking at is 200 people, 200 kids over a 6-year period of time, over 12 grades. I mean, doing cocktail math, I'm just,
it's an ebb and flow for sure. The trend is up, but I think, again, when it comes to out of district placements, you're talking about spending a whole lot more per student than we would if they were in district, and that adds up. And if you look at the school budget, you look at, I'm not just talking about SPED placements. I'm talking about in general, the outflow of monies because of students going out of district is a very crucial part of what makes up the budget. So,
okay, all right. We need an offline discussion, Christopher, because you and I have, I won't say a disagreement, but I've got thoughts, you have thoughts. So why don't we just hook up at some other point about this? How's that?
I would love to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you. Duncan, did you have your hand up and then it's down, or are you all?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Christopher brought up the numbers, but these numbers aren't secret, and as you all know and are tired of hearing me say, I'm in that school 2 days a week. I'm in the classrooms, and so, but the number of students is growing, and they're growing fastest in the elementary schools. So that foreshadows what's coming. And, and all the efforts to keep our kids in district are going to enhance that even further. So these are no secrets. It's in the school committee presentation to us. The numbers are everywhere, so it shouldn't be a mystery to anybody.
Thank you, Duncan. Hugh, go ahead. And then Chris Vitale.
I'm just going to say that vocational is one thing. Remember, Diamond is built into the system. We already pay for Diamond. And Diamond shows how many spaces we have for students to go to Diamond. So that is one place where kids go out of district in the sense of not the Westport School, but doesn't cost anything extra because we already paid for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Hugh. Chris? Chris V.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess just a comment on, the presentation of it and how it's, it's been categorized. So, from what the town received from the school, I think the language was service delivery increase. Now, I know obviously the nature of the roles that are being proposed and, their importance, whether to expand existing offerings or to keep class sizes down, I think they serve a different purpose. When you look at the 3 positions under that category based off of the budget that was, sent and provided by the school, the total cost for those 3 positions is $215,000. And right now there's $80,000, which, based off of what's going to be submitted to the board on Monday, that 80,000 is still there, right? So, that 80,000 could be, as of now, applied at the school's discretion to fund one of those positions. So I think from, the standpoint of looking at those different roles, I think the discretion is there, to, should the school decide they want to fund the social studies teacher or the other coordinator role. So I just want to make that note.
Nancy was first.
Go ahead, Nancy. Thank you, Al. I appreciate that.
Try not to get into an argument with you, Al. So the $80,000, that line item that was pulled out of the budget was presented in the school budget originally. And that because I have all my notes, because the school is a big part of this budget consideration. But that line item of the $80,000 was presented to be for technology to upgrade what they have on certain computers in the district, wasn't it?
No, so that's a separate line within the school budget. So, if you're looking at the table that more or less gives you a breakdown of the changes, in additions for this fiscal year, there was 81,000 that was for technology. That's towards the top of the page. And then as you go further down, when you look at the, service delivery increases, there's the 3 positions that are being proposed. And, there's, if you, I guess, look at the totals there, there's an $80,000 credit from the personnel reorganization that was done, as Christopher mentioned, to help support the cost or help offset the cost of those new positions. Now, just based off of, I'll say, the credit that's there, it's, as it was mentioned, it's a sizable credit. So that's something where, regardless of the 135,000, which, unfortunately within, the recommendation, that wasn't something that I thought our revenue supported. That 80,000 would remain, and as part of my recommendation to allow the school, to prioritize, if they did, want to move forward with hiring a position. But that recommendation would stay in place, like I said, for Monday's meeting with the select board.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm still confused because isn't the 80,000 that warrant, is that funded by free cash?
So I think we're talking, I guess, again, 2 different things. So the 81,000, rather than it appearing, for the technology, the $81,000 is being proposed as a set aside article.
So what was
From
the,
free cash, from free cash.
Yes, from free cash.
yeah, I'm just wondering, why was it done that way and just not come out of the CPIC budget? Why was it done as a separate warrant article?
So I think, I guess similar to, the overall budget process starting very early, the capital planning committee also started their deliberations early this year, and their recommendation was already submitted into the board, at the time that we got these numbers and, started deliberating to see, what could be done. So, rather than it going back to CIPC to update the recommendation to go back to the select board, the select board does have the discretion, to, propose a separate article. So that's what they opted to do here.
Okay.
And I say they opted to do what they anticipate doing.
Yeah, I just was wondering because I saw it as a separate one. I just didn't understand it. But I will say
Yeah,
one
certainly.
thing about what Al said, and I couldn't agree more with you, Al. Is knowing I have said it since I sat on the school committee. The 5-year plan within interdepartments in this town and the collective bargaining that goes on, like an octopus with all different arms, not operating in different directions without operating with communication. And so to understand what's going on with all the unions is not negotiating in the best interest of the town. I think that we did it in the school budget. I mean, take Michelle Raposa. We've all know her. She's great. She wears 3 hats in that school system. She does transportation, she does the food, and she does the business management budget. And when you sit there and say, who are we going to hire? Who are you going to hire out there for what we pay her on a single line item of salary to do those 3 jobs? Impossible. So you have to look at that because she's not going to be here forever. You're not going to get those discounts. So you have to look at your aging personnel and look what it costs to replace them 5 years before they retire. So you can start moving it into the budget. And I think that we're very much on the same page, Al. That's a business model that people use. It's something that the town hasn't done. I don't understand why. But even when I'm looking at departments and we have capital improvements, and that's great. But I think that each department would benefit from looking at their personnel and their equipment and their technology needs and phasing it in to prepare these budgets moving forward because it's going to be so tight.
No, I agree with you, Nancy. And one of the problems is the general accepted accounting practice, GAAP accounting practice, does not include personnel as part of, an expense line, and it should. So I'll just leave it at that, but it to me, it's just flat out stupid not to include and anticipate future cost regarding replacement cost of people, not a truck, not a plow, not whatever. Okay, so you and I are in agreement with that for sure. The other thing too, which and I've kind of lost the train of thought again, but it was it's kind of important. Maybe I'll stick my hand up again just to make the point that yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, Cindy, I think you were next.
Just a quick point. I think you'll see when we go through the warrant articles, Chris, the town administrator, has attempted to begin that process to some degree of funding personnel, future personnel needs. There is an article in the warrant that is for collective bargaining, but I think it could be phrased in a little bit more broader sense. It's a new notion for us as a town. And I know that Gary has brought this up in the past, that we should use this because I know they've used it in Dartmouth. Chris is certainly familiar with it, and so is Gary. That you start funding a little bit each year for either collective bargaining, pay increases in the future, or payouts of retirement payouts for people, or it could be used if all of a sudden you have a stipend. If someone leaves unexpectedly in October, we're already under the gun for that fiscal year because we've already budgeted for that year. And so we don't have any financing available to replace someone at a much higher level in that current year. We have no control, as to when people may retire unexpectedly or for whatever reason. So I think that we are starting to see that a little bit. And I don't recall, Chris, how much you recommended that be funded with, or if that was still up in the air, but you might want to talk about that a little bit, Chris Vitale.
Yeah, certainly. So that is something that I am putting forward for consideration for the board again on Monday. They haven't settled on a final number. I think it's going to be a little less than what that initial draft was. But with that, like you said, having that as a mechanism, and obviously when we look at collective bargaining agreements, when we look at non-union agreements, that's certainly a goal, right? I mean, I think we want to be competitive, and we want it to be a place where people are getting paid for what they can provide us. So this article, I think there's been a lot of success in the communities that do have an article like this. It does allow you more flexibility when it comes to phasing in the cost of contracts versus it hitting any one fiscal year. There's other financial strategies you could utilize it for. It just gives the town options. So that's being put forward for consideration by the board. And
Chris, would you also have it include, though, for unexpected, people that have separations from their job? It's not just for negotiated salary increases, but it could be used in the case that we're short $25,000-$30,000 because we have to replace someone unexpectedly.
So we would handle that slightly different. And I only say, I guess, to the point that you mentioned, just with regards to, the fiscal calendar. It's something where I don't necessarily know or I've had experience using it to, because again, similar, I guess, to, free cash, these are one-time funds. So you'd have to, it depends on timing, I guess, is the long and short of it.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that if someone left in October, and you don't have enough budget in your current budget, but you can budget for it the following year, but you're going to be short, say, $20,000 in the current year, could that article be used for something for that purpose? I mean, that's exactly what we were describing.
Yeah, so I guess theoretically you could have an article, after the stabilization fund was created and, you had money within that account, you could make an appropriation from that account, for a specific purpose.
Okay.
Depending on what, the allowance is, once the stabilization fund's created. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Christopher, go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Christopher.
There we go.
There you
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just going back a couple of moments, I also want to just concur with what Mr. Lees and Ms. Sandcross and others have mentioned. It is unfortunate that we don't budget for replacement costs. And when I hear talking about Michelle Raposa at the school department wearing 3 hats, that's the official titles. There's about 14 other hats laying on the desk as well, as far as what she does, and that's just one of the people that really do go above and beyond job descriptions. The one thing I wanted to mention with regard to the warrant article that has been pulled out for the technology warrant article, so that original funding was included in the school department's budget proposal, and that actually is part of the tiered replacement strategy that was implemented last year and to some extent the year before that, to start replacing technology on a cycle as opposed to having all in one large chunks. So that's where that technology article that's been pulled out separately came from, was part of that replacement, and that was, as I said, that was within the original budget proposal. So I just wanted to clarify that one thing.
Thank you. Hugh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, think everybody seems to be overlooking in this is we don't have the money to anticipate this, that, and the other thing. And the second point I would say, if you have a pot of money sitting on the table awaiting collective bargaining negotiations, you're going to start from the amount of money in the pot. You're not going to end there, and everybody knows there's money available. You may also remember, it's not directly related, but some years ago, we went to arbitration and saying we didn't have the money, and the arbitrator said, oh, you've got money in the stabilization fund, you can afford the raise. So it's all nice and tidy, and would be nice if we could do it. But we don't have the money. And it's putting aside money for future expenses. A, we don't have the money now to put ahead, and B, it tends to trigger higher future expenses through negotiations. Enough said.
Thank you, Hugh. You know, I was going to make a similar comment, but I saw your hand go up, Hugh, so I knew you were going to handle it.
I'm afraid I have a reputation.
I agree. I mean, I support everything that everyone's saying for, you know, for the needs, and there's just not enough dollars to go around to reserve those dollars and all of the buckets and pots that we want to. And, you know, Nancy, I support 5-year plans, absolutely, not just in negotiating salaries, but full 5-year plans, full 5-year operating plans, full 5-year capital plans. You know, the more dollars that are put into the budget and the operating budget gets tighter, means there's less free cash that will be generated, which means that's going to put a strain on capital needs. And if we don't have a good handle on what the capital needs are for 5 years out, that we're missing a lot of pieces. So we're trying to spend money in the budget because that's needed today, but there's also money that's needed tomorrow. And it's a very difficult balance, but as Hugh said, there's just not enough dollars that can go around to support all of the needs. So this is a very difficult balance that we're in every year.
Madam Chairman, what else do we have on the agenda? It seems to me we've been working this over pretty thoroughly.
I think I was going to let Al and then
I just have a couple of quick comments. Hugh, I will respectfully disagree with you on this, that I think that we need to allocate so-called free cash in buckets rather than going to town meeting and spending it all and then hoping for it next year. We need to reserve a portion of it for the stuff that we're talking about. Number two, and then I will end it, the dirty little secret about the school department and the salary, we're talking about $80,000 for ABC, is that the dirty little secret is that about 30 to 35% of that salary gets allocated to the so-called town side of the budget. It doesn't get pegged to the school. That is salary only. There's no insurance. There's no not insurance, but retirement. There's no insurance. There's no A, B, C, D. That's the way it has always been in this town. Probably most towns, if not all towns. But I think we need to recognize that an $80,000 salary for a teacher or whomever is really taking away from money that should be going to so-called town side. I'll leave it at that.
Al, I just want to clarify what you said. I think you're saying that the town side, the town departments budget the fringe benefits for all new positions.
Correct. Yes,
So you're saying when the school increases a salary, the fringe benefits on the town side also have to.
correct.
go.
They don't hit the school side of the budget. They hit the town side of the budget. And that's the way it's always been. So there's a deeper cost than just 80,000, 50,000, whatever the number is. It's immaterial. There's a significant amount, a third probably, that gets hit on the town side, which takes away from money to be spent on other operating expenses for the town.
Thank you, Al. Go ahead, Nancy.
So I kind of don't like the words of dirty little secret. So it's not a dirty little secret. Towns traditionally all over the Commonwealth, Al, and stop calling them. Some do it on the town side of the budget, some do it on the school side of the budget. All it would take is an allocation, and then it wouldn't be a 54-48 split, would it? Because the personnel on the school side is higher, and therefore you have to cover that. This has been something that has been talked about for years. We actually did an evaluation when Jim Hartnett was there as to out of the pot of money in the town, and we took that money, what you're saying, the dirty little secret, the pensions and the retirement, and we looked at that number as well as the crossover services between both places, and we got absolutely really nowhere with it. So it's not as simple as what you've stated that it is. It's not.
The taxpayers of this town do not understand that, Nancy.
Well, they don't understand a lot of other things on the other side, Al, so maybe we'll have an offline discussion about that.
Okay, I'm here and available.
I got plenty of dirty little secrets. We can pull those out.
Let's keep, as Hugh said earlier, let's keep moving it along.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Okay, so anything else on the budget, and we can let, I think we've talked about the warrant as well, so I'm not sure there's much at this point that else we need to talk about there, so. Anything else before I'll let Chris to go home and enjoy his evening. All right, Chris, I'd hit the exit button as quick as you can. But Chris, we appreciate your being here. I think this was helpful to really, so you can understand kind of where we're at. And I think you're on a good path. So we'll firm it all up when we see some numbers. So.
Sounds good. Well, thank you all. If there are any questions from any of the members, please feel free to email me. If not, I'll see you at your next meeting.
All right. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
All right.
All right. So we skipped the first item, so we'll move on to the council. I put this on the agenda, but I didn't realize that it was meant for next week, but we may be able to discuss it. So this is the request from the Council on Aging for $5,743.42 for the vehicle repair. Beverly Bish had come in to us a few months ago with the need, and we had asked her to make sure she if she was able to have funds from to be able to use it, and she's come back and clearly indicated that she needs those funds that the vehicle repair.
Yeah, the
She could-
vehicle, if you recall, the vehicle, it's one of the transportation vans, and the vehicle did not pass inspection. So she had to have the required updates done to the vehicle, and the lift, the hydraulic lift to get into the van for wheelchair access was broken as well. And she sought out additional funding elsewhere to see if insurance or some grants or something would cover it. And this is one of the few times where she came up empty. So she has respectfully requested that we reconsider this. She does have to pay that bill, and would like us to consider that. We did tell her that we would reconsider it at a later date.
Hugh, go ahead.
I would just add to it, I do remember, came in, made a good presentation. We said, see what you can do to find some money here and elsewhere, but you can come back. She's done exactly what we asked her to do. The end result is 5,000 and change to keep the van on the road. So I would move in favor of it.
I'll
I'll
second
second
that.
that.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, so we'll further discussion. So Christopher?
One brief question. Do we have any idea of the, what the amount is in the reserve fund as of right now?
We have not spent anything, so it would be the original budget.
Is that 150 that we
Might be
started?
150?
Yeah, 150, I believe. I'm sure we're gonna hear from the highway department, soon for snow removal.
Yeah.
You think? You think they've blown their budget?
I would think so, but, we haven't heard from them in several years, but I think this year might be one of those.
Right.
Yeah.
Always happened on a Sunday.
Mhm.
Yes, so to Christopher, I don't remember the budget, but this is our first request to use any funds for that budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate
Sure. Any other questions? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Then I'll move to a vote. So I will start with Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's eye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Nancy,
Nancy Stanton, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so the next item would be any committee and liaison updates, if anybody had anything to share.
Do not.
Okay. And I'm going to ask to pass over the minutes because sorry for repeating myself, but I did not get a chance to update those. So I'll try to do those for next Tuesday. So the next item, I have no correspondence. Our next budget items are on this upcoming Tuesday, February 24th. We have the beach committee, town accountant, and a representative from Diamond Regional School next Tuesday. And so the select board is meeting Monday to approve the budget. So we'll see how quickly, if will be able to get together any final budget and get it sent to us so we can have something in hand. So that might be tight, but we'll see what we have. So that I'll surely put that on the budget on the agenda for next week.
And there is a draft of the warrant that's posted on the town website as well.
Oh, good. And it's in our drive too. So,
Right.
oh, it's on the town website now. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I know some people were asking, some members of some residents were asking for it. So good.
It's
So-
not on the splash page. I can't say that I'm in love with the new design of the website. I find things harder to find, but I think it's just because I'm not used to, I'm used to the old way and not the new way. I happened to stumble across it
Oh, so it's not on the home.
on the
front
home
page?
splash page. Yeah, not as
Oh,
of 2 days ago anyway. Maybe
Okay.
it is now.
okay.
I was researching something else and I happened to stumble across it.
Yeah, okay.
You know, to tee off on your comments and very, very briefly, it would be great if on the town website, there could be a link to the Meet Google so that I don't need to dive through and try to find your emails, Karen. You know, it used to be that you could just go there and click and away you go. And unless I'm missing it, it just
I think
doesn't seem to be there.
There isn't
You
a
need to get
tab that
to-
says meetings and agendas, or
It
isn't?
it does, but you have to copy it and paste it.
Oh, you do?
No, I
No,
go right to the
I could be wrong.
town's, I go right to the town's website and right on the homepage, there's the
Okay.
calendar. And if you click right on the date, so today was the 19th, if you click on the 19th, it lists all of the meetings, and you click right on there and it's a hyperlink that will take you right here.
Okay, so I'm wrong. I'm a Luddite, and and the older I get,
Yeah.
the more I. So
Yep.
I'll look at it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay. All right. Well, anybody else have anything else? Otherwise, we can adjourn for the night.
Motion to adjourn.
Super.
Second.
Okay, I will do a roll call. Hugh,
You're more than I.
Al,
Ali's eye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Christopher,
Christopher Brasher,
Nancy,
Nancy Stanton Cross, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. All right. Thank you, everyone, for our Thursday. See you next week.